Welcome, media. We're joined by Ken Holland. Again, if you have questions, please use the raise hand function. If you have a follow-up question, please ask it following your first. Start with Reed Wilkins, 630 Chad.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, Ken. I know there's probably going to be a lot of trade questions today, but I'd like to start by asking, do you have an update on the condition of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins?
He won't play tomorrow night, and we're hoping that he will be ready to go next weekend.
Okay. In terms of the maybe major needs for this team, if you want to talk about a top six winger or a third line center, how likely or unlikely is it that some of those needs could be filled by the deadline Monday afternoon?
We'll see. It's hard to handicap trade deadline. I'll give you the challenges, obviously, because we're in LTI. You've probably heard it before. We're basically dollar in, dollar out. So, if you pick a number, if you think that we're going to add X amount of dollars, for the most part, we're going to have to move X amount off the roster, at least onto the taxi squad. And, we've played, I think, what are we, 22-8-1 our last 31 games. So lots of, in order to have that record, lots of those players that are on the roster have obviously contributed to that record, to our success. So, it's not only the cost in terms of assets to acquire a player and put them on your roster, but we're also going to basically take that amount of money off our roster, and you can get at it in the playoff time, but certainly, after April 12th, there's 4 recalls, and it's going to be pretty difficult to get at some players on taxi the rest of the way. So those are the factors that go into my thinking between now and Monday.
Jim Matheson, Post Media.
A couple of things, Ken. Kyle Turris on waivers. Is that just the roster flexibility in terms of his salary compared to somebody on the taxi squad?
That's correct, yes.
And you've got a team with a top six. You've been a general manager for a long time. How much does size weigh into regular season top six players compared to playoff top six players? You need much bigger people in a playoffs.
Well, playoffs is going to be tougher. Obviously over the regular season, you're playing against 31 teams. Now this year, obviously it's division of 7, but you're going to play. You're going to be in the round of 16, and then if you win a round, you're down to the best 8 teams, and then if you win a round, you're down to the final 4, and you win a round, you're down to the final 2. So the regular season is tough. The first round is tougher. Second round is harder than the first round, and so you're playing better teams. You're playing teams that have done the same thing. They've qualified for the playoffs, and they've knocked somebody out, and they're advancing to the next round. So certainly, all those things you're talking about, Jim, it gets. It gets, as you go, the farther along you go, it gets amplified. The depth of your team, the size of your team, and all those things become more and more important because you're playing better and better teams if you're able to keep advancing.
Thank you.
Josh Clipperton, Canadian Press.
Hey, Ken. I'm just wondering, this is obviously such a strange and different year with the pandemic, and you did sort of mention the dollar in, dollar out aspect, but if you could, what are you thinking Monday or the next 72 hours is going to look like? Is it going to be really quiet, or what are we in for?
Well, are you talking about the Oilers or around the league?
Across the league, sorry, yeah.
Well, I think there's going to be some moves. I think this time of the year, I think as a general manager, when your team has played at a high level, you'd like to be able to, pitch in and make a move to, give a little more depth, give your team a little better or bring in a player that you think is going to upgrade you to a position that's going to give you a little better opportunity. Because, that's why we play the game, is to try to eventually be the team that last team standing and win the Stanley Cup. So I would anticipate there's going to be, obviously there's been a couple of moves here in the last couple of days. I would anticipate there's going to be some. I don't know if it's going to be I don't know if it's going to be as busy as in past years. I think if you said to me on a normal year, what's a normal trade deadline look like? It's probably, I don't know. I'm just going, 17, 18 to 20, 22 moves. I don't anticipate that there'll be that many moves, but I think there's going to be some movement between now and Monday, because obviously the league is tight. There's lots of teams think that they can go on a playoff run. If you get in, anything can happen.
And in terms of the change of the Canadian quarantine from 2 weeks down to 1 week, have you noticed a change in just conversations, maybe for yourself or just across the league? Because it sounded like Canadian GMs might not have even wanted to go down that road with U.S. teams, especially with older players. Does that change much, do you think, with the 7 days versus 14 days?
I do. I think obviously it's a week shorter, but I do. I think it makes it easier to justify making a deal. I mean, if you made a deal on Monday and then you couldn't have the player for 2 weeks, and then it's 3-4 days to get him in shape. It's not really 2 weeks. It's probably 2.5 to 3 weeks. Versus now it's 7 days and 2-3 days. It's probably 10 days by the time you get the players. So certainly, I think you look at the standings too. I think if you're looking for, if you're on the bubble and you might want to make a move and you're hoping that player is going to impact your team to play your way in, I think it's going to be more difficult. I think if you feel that you've got enough of a cushion between you and the fifth place team that you can wait for that player to go through that quarantine and get ready, makes it a lot easier.
Mark Spector, Sportsnet.
Again, it kind of sounds like you got a lot of depth guys here. We talked about this a little before. You got a lot of depth guys. Maybe the guys you need out there you can't afford. Is that like, can you afford a top line player, or are you limited to shopping for depth guys that maybe you don't need that much?
I think that's the $1 million question. I think you've hit it on. What we did in the off season as the rules were coming out. I think Mark, you and I talked about this a few days ago. Is when it started to appear that we were going to have a taxi squad, and it wasn't just a normal 23-man roster because of moving players from the U.S. to Canada, especially with us having our farm team in the States and in Vancouver. We wanted to have depth, and we knew we were going to have a 29-man roster. So, in the month of December, we went out and, kind of thought we were close, and then we went out and signed Slater Kukuk and Dominic Cahoon, a forward and a defenseman to make us, deeper and better, was the thinking. And so I think from a depth standpoint, we've had a 29-man roster all year. I think Dave Tippett has done a great job in moving players in and out, and he's kept lots of the players, not everyone, but he's kept lots of the players involved. So I think from a depth standpoint, we feel good about our depth. I think that if anything happens between now and Monday, it's to try to find somebody that can either upgrade us at a position or impact, and then you come back to the cap and the assets.
Thank you.
Gary Jones, Post Media.
Kenny, this isn't your first rodeo, but like everybody else involved, it's your first one dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. What's this been like? I mean, both personally and organizationally, to go through something like this and to get to this day?
Well, I think, Terry, it's, I think not only in our sport, I think it's been hard on everybody. And then, it's been a very trying, difficult time. And then I think, to come to the NHL, basically, you go to, I know for me, I go to my condo, I go to the rink when I'm in Edmonton, and when we're on the road, I go from my hotel room down to the meal room and over to the rink and to the plane, and we go on to the next spot. So, I mean, there's no social activity. There's no going anywhere. Certainly that's the NHL, NHLPA protocol. So, we're all making decisions to try to, for something that's our job, but we love our job and we love what we do. And we're trying to keep not only ourselves safe, but obviously decisions that each of us make can impact, our team and other teams in our division. So, I think it's a trying time, but it's been a trying time for everybody, whatever walk of life you're in. It hasn't been easy. It's been a challenge, for everybody with this virus.
But like organization, well, just you personally, I mean, your average year involves a lot of.
Well, I mean, my job is different. Terry. I mean, a normal year. I'm going to go to the World Junior. I mean, I was at the World Junior. I was living across the street from the World Junior this year in my condo. I couldn't go watch. I watched the games on TV. So, it's a different time. I'd go to Bakersfield 3-4 times a year. I'd go to, go down south of the border and do some scouting, college games. And so, my job is totally different this year than in any other year. I'm basically with the team. I travel with the team, and I watch games, talk to the coach, and so it's certainly the things that I've done in past years are totally different now. Totally different.
What about the rest of your staff, though? I mean, scouting players you might be interested in on Monday, getting ready for the draft and all that stuff. What are they doing, sitting in watching it on TV at home?
Well, our pro scouts are watching, doing all video. They got a game every day, and they put in reports. It's still not nearly. It's not as good, If you're watching a player, he comes on the screen, especially a defenseman. We were talking recently with our pro scouts, and it's differently when you talk to, especially defensemen. They come in the screen, they come off the screen. It's sometimes you can't read their gap and some things, So, but our pro scouts are scouting. They're putting in reports. Obviously, we know going into the off season, from a pro standpoint, we have to make some decisions on our team heading into 21-22. So that's going to be different. We've had monthly pro scout Zoom calls, starting, I think the season started in the middle of January, so middle of February, middle of March, and then had one just last week as we shoot towards the trade deadline. And then on the amateur side, I know Tyler Wright has done a little traveling, but certainly for the amateur scout, it's been different. They're doing lots of video scouting too, but they do get to go to some games.
Daniel Bowman, The Athletic.
Hi, Ken. You just mentioned there how much more you're with the team this year. You're solely with the team. Is there a pro and con to that? Do you feel like you have a little bit more tunnel vision in terms of knowing a lot more about your team? I'm sure you're watching other games, but is it a little bit different in that regard? And is there kind of concern about maybe not knowing the league as much this year?
Yeah, I think there's, obviously it's better, Daniel, to go out and about and you kind of go to games, but it is what it is. I think we're all trying to make the best of difficult times. And, I still, I think there's more Zoom calls. There's been more phone calls. More, it's about communication, and we've tried to make sure that I've been in constant communication with, my chief pro scout, Archie Henderson, my chief amateur scout, Tyler Wright, and basically Keith Gretzky has been down with Bakersfield all year, making sure that we got some kids down there, and there's, some more young players have come in here over the last week and 10 days and be on top of that and work with Jay Woodcroft, because certainly, if you want to be a good organization, you got to draft, you got to develop, and they come through your farm team. So that's sort of been what, again, because you can't travel, you can't get on a plane. And Keith would be in Bakersfield. He'd come to Edmonton, and he'd go some different places. Well, because of the quarantine, Keith has just been basically down with Bakersfield the entire year. So certainly the way we do our jobs is differently than in the past. But I think that we're going to be ready for the amateur draft. We're going to be ready for the off season for free agency, and I believe we're ready to go to make whatever decisions we got to make between now and Monday for the trade deadline.
And you have some pretty prominent pending unrestricted free agents in Nugent Hopkins, Larkin, Barrie, and even Mike Smith, who's had a very, very good year. What do you think about that from kind of a team building perspective heading into Monday? And do you like the flexibility it gives you in the summer, or is it a little bit worrisome that you have to kind of figure out these guys?
No, I mean, I think Daniel, I mean, obviously, I think that's also, let's say we don't do anything by Monday. In my mind, we're, when you've got a team that's a playoff team and you've got some unrestricted free agents, there's always the risk that they're not with you next year, and certainly that's a risk that I'm prepared. I'm prepared to take. I think that the goal for 2021 is to try to make the playoffs and then try to go on a playoff run. And that'll deal with the off season in the off season. I've had some communication with some of the people on our unrestricteds on our team. Obviously, hasn't led to any announcements of extensions, but that's a risk I'm prepared to take in trying to go on a playoff run this year, make the playoffs and go on a playoff run.
Jason Gregor, TSN 1260.
Dave, you talk about size and experience, and you've got a guy on your roster in James Neal who has all that. Last year in the bubble, he played quite well for your team. We all know he had COVID and conditioning factor. Do you expect him to be available for your team down the stretch and in the playoffs?
I do. Jason, anybody that's going to be on, today he's on taxi. And let's fast forward to 5 days, if he was on taxi on April the 13th, part of what I'm going to that we are going to do is to make sure that we've got cap space available so that we can access our taxi, and also cap space available if Slater Kukuk gets healthy and he's ahead of schedule. He might be able to play some games at the end of the season. So I need some cap space to access our taxi and to be ready for Slater Kukuk. So that's going to be the way it's going to be set up on April 12th and 13th, Monday and Tuesday. So James Neal or anybody that's on taxi is going to be, obviously we'll have four recalls. So, when you call up a player once, if he goes down and plays one game, that's one recall. If you call a player up and he plays 5, 6, 7 games, that's one recall. So we have to be careful with our recalls. We can't just wheel him up and down to play one game. But certainly James Neal will be available to Dave Tippett if he wants to put him in the lineup.
And, you've talked very openly about, not wanting to just add more depth. You've got a lot of depth. You talk about your team's record recently. So how do you balance that with salary cap? Are you willing to be kind of like salary cap gymnastics a little bit to sweeten the pot if a deal's right? Or does somebody really going to have to kind of be willing to, give you a good deal in order to add a good player?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's going to be determined between now and Monday. Obviously, Jason, you look around the league, there's in some deals, the teams retain salary. Some deals, they don't retain salary. I think if a team's got a player and wants to get him moved and there's multiple teams after him and somebody wants to take on the full salary, that's going to factor into the cost of the assets. So there's a bunch of different ways to get deals done. So I think that's ultimately the what transpires between now and Monday. And I just, again, it's hard to handicap until you get on the phone, and then when I'm on the phone, I'm talking to one team, and if I've been I was a buyer for a lot of years in Detroit, probably 15 years at least as a buyer. And then the last 3 years, Detroit, when I was there, we missed the playoffs. I became a seller, and it's different when I'm the seller. I'm answering the phones, and I've got somebody that people want, and I can I know that I control it a little bit more. When you're a buyer, I'm making a call and telling somebody I'm interested in this player, and I'm not, it's poker. You're playing poker, and so ultimately. That's the art of being a general manager at trade deadline time between now and Monday is to get deals done.
Jim Matheson.
Ken, are you adverse totally to giving up your first round draft choice for a player, considering you don't have a second round pick and you don't have a third round pick, you don't have a fifth round pick? The first round pick definitely out of play this year for any player?
Definitely on a rental. I'm not going to trade a first for a rental. I guess if a player had some term, I would be open to it.
Okay. And what about, where are we on the Dylan Holloway situation with? I know you had the Zoom call and stuff. Are we still in waiting to see how his thumb really is, or what?
Pardon me? He's got a broken thumb. I was on a call with his agent a couple of days ago. So it's probably going to be into May before he will be able to, around May the 1st. They don't have exact dates, but around May the 1st, they want to take some more, X-rays and CT scans, and they want to see how it's healing. And if everything is going good, then sometime in, late April, he might be able to start skating. Early May, start skating. I'm not sure when he will be cleared to play hockey. So no, we're talking. We'll see where it goes. But again, I guess there's no real urgency because he can't really get involved. I mean, I guess he can do everything, but he can't. He can't do anything with his one hand with the stick. So I'm sure he's doing his cardio and everything, but he really can't do much with it as far as practicing and stuff.
Final question, Terry Jones.
Ken, there's another aspect to being a general manager in this year, and that's obviously the COVID thing and everything. But with the postponed games and the rescheduling and all that, to what extent have you been involved in that? And how do you see? You've got games to make up with Vancouver, obviously. What do you think of having 6 days off next week? And also, do you expect another extension of the schedule, or is there some creative? Just what can you tell us?
Well, my involvement would be I would talk to Steve Hetzer-Petros, who's the head of the department of building a schedule. The regular season schedule. I've known Steve became manager in 1997, and I think probably about 95 or 96 as the assistant manager, I started to become, the lead guy in Detroit, working with the schedule. So I got a relationship with Steve that goes, way back. And obviously, as they're trying to make, first order of business is to make sure everybody's safe and are on the rebound and getting healthy in Vancouver. Obviously, that's a very serious situation. And, so I know the league is talking to Vancouver, and then we've got 3 games with Vancouver. We're supposed to play Vancouver last Saturday, I think, and then we're supposed to play Monday and Wednesday, which are where we will not be playing. So there's obviously 3 games that we've got to get rescheduled with Vancouver. So, as Steve Hetzer-Petros gets some ideas, he'll reach out to me. I know he's got to reach out to both teams or lots of teams, and obviously there's TV and lots of people involved in these decisions. So certainly that's I'm involved in advance, knowing what they're thinking, where they're looking to put these schedules on our calendar. Do I think that we'll get our schedule extended a little bit? That's certainly the indication that I'm hearing. So I'm right now, obviously our schedule's been extended to the Monday and the Tuesday at the end of May, whatever, 10, 11 at Montreal. I think there's a possibility that we could be extended another couple of days, but I think they're still working on it.
Thank you. This concludes Ken Holland's media availability.